Okay guys, so in part one of this animated SVG circles videos, I showed you how to create these animated circles SVG, giving some example SVG code, some example styles and some overrides for those on a instance basis. What I'm going to do here is go into more detail about how we create these SVGs, some of the caveats around it, and then I'm going to show you how I've just done this one up the top here, which has actually got text instead of a outline border. So that's what we're going to cover in this. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is how the SVGs actually work for scaling. So if we look at the SVG here at the bottom, so that bottom one there, we'll see the computed size is 140 by 140. Okay. Now with SVGs, what happens is when you scale up or scale down, it also scales up and down the stroke. So if you've got a box that you create, this in a view box of 150 by 150, you then have a stroke of 10. If you scale that up to 300 by 300, double the size, you then end up with a stroke the size of 20. If you half the size down to say 75 pixels, you'll end up with a stroke of 5. So the stroke scales as the SVG scales from its original view box. So to get what you want, the best strategy is to have a look on the screen, just put something on the screen. Look at the first one, that's the inside. SVG here. The wrong SVG, let's find it properly. There we go, it's a bit hard to find. So it's this one here, it's 140 by 140. So we want to create a view box roughly that size. Doesn't have to be exact. I would say I'd go with 150 by 150, keep it nice and simple. So to get our strokes the right width, let's create a view box of 150 by 150. So if I head over to Illustrator, I've already got a artboard at 150 pixels by 150 pixels. I'm just viewing it. If I do a Control 1, that's my size of the actual artboard that I'm going to be looking at. So I'm just going to zoom in so I can look a little bit better. And what we're going to do is create a circle by holding down the Control key, and just creating a circle that pretty much fills the space. Okay, and we're going to center that to the artboard. So there it is there. Now, I've got a fairly thick stroke on that at the moment. If I drop that stroke back, say to 4 points, and I'm just going to scale up here. So what you might typically think is you create the circle right to the edge of the view box. The problem with doing that is that if you create this as a stroke and you want to vary the stroke with CSS rules, like for example here, this is a single SVG with the orange and the blue, but the orange has got a thicker stroke than the blue. So you want to vary that with your CSS. What happens that if you output this as a path and then you create a bigger stroke on it, the stroke gets to the edge of the view box and then it gets clipped. So you don't end up with an actual circle, you end up with a kind of a circle with the edges clipped. Maybe that's an effect you'd like to do, like if you went to really huge stroke like that, you'd find that it's really clipped on the edges there. But I want an actual circle, I don't want it clipped. So what I'm looking at here, so let's say for example, that's about the maximum thickness that I think I might display this at. We'll go to our Control 1 again. So let's say that's about the thickness that you're going to display it at. What I would do is use my Control and Shift key, my Alt and Shift key I should say, and put that in a bit so that we've got a little bit of wiggle room on the edges. So now I've got a 9-point stroke on that circle, but I can actually go all the way up to, where are we here, 15 point before it hits the edge of the view box. So I can make it really thick if I want to. So I would say just allow for enough to go up by, I don't know, 5 or 6. It depends on what you want. But that's what you need to do. And the reason we have to do that is because with SVG, you cannot determine, there's no property to determine whether that stroke gets drawn on the inside, outside, or center of a shape. It's always in the center. So you can see this blue around here, that's the actual path, and the stroke is around the center of that. In Illustrator, you can tell it whether you want it in the center, on the outside, or in the center. What's this one here? That's the inside, that's the outside, and that's the center. This is the default with SVG, and you can't change it. So we need to allow for, as we make a bigger stroke, that it doesn't get all the way to the edge and start clipping. So that's the first thing that we need to know about the SVGs. So to create this effect here, where I've got the broken circle and I've got a different segment on that circle, which I've targeted, the way we do that is using the scissor tool. So I'm just going to find the scissor tool. It's quite hard to find here we go, it's on the eraser. I'm going to finger on the eraser and go to the scissor tool. And then what you'll find is it's a strange tool. When you're clicking in places, it just doesn't do anything. But if you roll your mouse over anywhere off this path, you'll see a little weird red word called path come up. It's a bit small, so you may or may not be able to see it. But as I move my cursor over this path, I can see the word path come up. Click on that, and that creates a node there, which is actually a broken node. So if I then go to another point, click on there, go to another point, click, just go all around, just click on as big or as small chunks as you want. And maybe we'll just do a big chunk there, go to there. And if you don't get the word path, clicking doesn't do anything. So you've got to make sure you got that word path on your cursor, otherwise it doesn't actually do anything. Right, we're going to use our selection tool and delete that path there. And then we go to the next one. We want to keep that path, so we go to the next one, delete that. We want to keep that one. Go to the next one, delete that, keep this one, and actually could probably break that up a little bit more. So maybe we'll do that. So I'm just going to get my scissor again, and maybe just break that a little bit there, and select that piece, and delete that. So now we've got a broken circle. Right, once you've broken it, do not try to align this, because if you try to align this once it's broken, you're going to get a warp out of alignment circle as it's rotating. So what we want to do is pick one of these. Actually, so we're going to pick all of them, and we're going to set a stroke color to anything other than black, because Illustrator will output nothing if you don't have a color. So we'll make that say a dark blue, and then we're going to pick one segment, and we're going to tell that to be a, I don't know, maybe this red. So that just gives us something different, so it knows that's a different style for exporting. Now at the moment you can see these strokes have all got a squared off edge. If I select them all and I want a different, I want a rounded edge, I can go to my corner caps and my caps here and just click on that, so I can get a butt end, a squared off end, or a corner cap. I quite like the corner cap, so I'll leave it on that. And there we go. That's our graphic in Illustrator prepared. Now all we need to do now is go File, Save As, on your computer. We're not actually going to save this, so you don't have to worry about it. So hit SVG. Do not tick use artboards, or this will not work in the next step properly. Okay, if you did tick use artboards, this button down here doesn't work. I'm not sure why Adobe have done that, but it just does not work if you select use artboards. Now, by default, this is going to use style attributes. So if I have a look at that, we'll see that it's created all these strokes, but on every single segment, it's put in the fill, the stroke, and the stroke width. All right, I don't want that. I want to actually control this with CSS attributes. So I'm going to select style elements, have a look at the SVG code for that. And now we end up with a different SVG where we've got ST0 and we've got ST1. And then it's just applying these classes to those paths. And that's exactly what we want. So I'm going to grab that SVG. I'm going to copy that and head over to Bricks. Back here, I'm going to change, maybe select this outer circle here, so the first circle on that second example, I'm going to go to my content and I'm going to delete all of that. I'm going to paste in my new SVG. So there's the new SVG that I've just put in there. And you can see there, I've got a orange on 3 segments, and I've got blue on 1 segment, and the oranges are all big and the blue small. All right, now let's have a look at our style. What we're going to do there is we're going to change these around. So we're going to make our ST0, which is obviously orange. We're going to make that 3 pixels, and we're going to make the ST1, we're going to make that, say, 10 pixels. So now we've got a bigger blue, smaller orange. Okay? And obviously you can change your colors there. So that's as simple as that for creating these SVGs in Adobe Illustrator. You can make these whatever you like. You can then target. If you wanted more of these, if you want these to all be separately targetable, just make them all a different color, all a different stroke color. And when you save that, you'll have a ST0, ST1, ST2, ST3, etc. And then you can target those separately with your CSS. At the moment, I'm just using 2. All right, so that is how we create our SVGs in Illustrator. Now let's have a look at this top one where we've got text. And look at how we did that. And by the way, this is using stroke. For the text, we need to use fill. And my default code here is setting all the strokes to a certain size with no fill. So we need to do something different with that. So if we head back over to our Illustrator and get rid of all of that, and let's just make another circle. Not worried about the stroke too much. Let's just make it 1 point. 1 point. And we'll center that. And that's probably roughly okay. We're going to change the size of this anyway. And then we're going to use our mouse tool. Hold our mouse down on the text tool and we're going to put type on a path. And then we're going to click on the first node where the anchor is. I'm going to type in something like website for small business. Oh, or maybe I'll do that in capitals. There we go, something nice and corny. Right, so let's change the font size a bit. I want Poppins here, bold. Let's change the font size a little bit. There we go, that'll do. We're still fitting in the screen. Grab that entire thing and just move it in just a little bit. So just using the Alt and Shift, we just want it to be a little bit inside the white, so we've got some wriggle room there. Okay, so there's our basic text on a path. Now we're going to click somewhere on the text, right click on it, and we're going to create outlines. So all we want is outlines for these text. And we're going to set a fill. If you leave it on black, Illustrator will output no fill. Okay, so we don't want it on black. Let's choose, say, this dark blue. And then I'm going to just select this website's text, and I'm going to make it a different color. It doesn't matter what it is because we're going to change all this anyway. As long as, if we only want 2 colors, then whichever color we pick has to be the same wherever we do it. So we've got websites. I'm just going to pick a word here. This is probably not a great example. Okay, and business we'll set to the same color. Color there. All right. So basically we've got text on a path converted to curves, and then we've got the main color set to this blue, and 2 of these words we've got set to this dark red. Right, we're ready to go. So if I hit File, Save As, on my computer, SVG, don't use artboards. Okay, and then we make sure we select Style Elements, and then copy our SVG code. So we've got an ST0 with no stroke, we just got to fill. Right, we're going to override these anyway. ST0, ST1, and there's our paths for our text there. Okay, so let's copy all of that and head over to bricks, and on that first content there, I'm going to Control A, Control V. So I've just pasted my CSS I've created, so my SVG I've created there. So now it says websites for small business made to high standards. Okay. Now, if I left it by default, I've actually just changed. If I take all this out here, it looks all messed up. Now, the reason for that is because I'm defaulting to setting some colors and stroke widths. And if we look at the code here, my ST0, ST1 here, I'm setting the stroke to the stroke width, stroke to the color, and the fill is by default none on both of these. So I'm favoring stroke because I'm using this mostly for the the broken outlines. But what we need to do is we need to tell it that for this particular one, we want to override those. So our circle one, ST0, so ST0 again, just reminding you, it was actually created by Illustrator when it exported. So we got the style here of ST1, which it puts on to all these paths, and the style of ST0, and ST1 is only put on a couple of them that have a different color. There's some ST1s here. All right, so that's pretty much why we do that now. So what I'm doing is setting the stroke width for ST1 and ST0 to 0, so get rid of the stroke. I'm setting the fill, which was none by default, to white for ST0 and red for ST1. Now let's say you want that red to be one of your bricks colors. Let's have a look at that. So what we're going to do is click on anything to inspect it, bring up our bricks colors in the selectors here. Let's say, I'm not sure what that is, whether that's accent or whatever. I think that's the accent color. So I've done another video on finding this. So we're going to grab this bricks color, and in there we're going to put var. Oops, I've got the caps on. All right. So now you can see this for and made to high standards is the color of the bricks color there. And let's say we want the other one to be maybe this green. So we'll make that var. And then we've got the green. That's probably too close to the other one. So let's maybe make it maybe you can make it this blue. All right, so there we go there. So hit the save on that and refresh this. There it is there. So in summary, all we've done for this one is in Illustrator, we've put text on a path, we've converted it to curves, we've selected some of those items and changed the color to a separate color, and we've set the main color to anything other than black. That allowed us to create an SVG, which we copied and pasted into our content for that basic text item. So we just copied and pasted into there, and then we went into our root styles and just overrode some of the variables that we've got in our rules. So I think this is really powerful because you can change so much here. You can change your animations, you can change your colors, you can change your inset, you can change all sorts of things. Actually, just as a curiosity, what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the content. I'm going to grab that SVG and I'm going to put that on the inside one as well. So I've got the same thing in there. All right, I'm going to copy the styles from this one as well and put that on the second one as well. Ooh, in there. This is circle 2, so I'm going to change those. There we go. So let's reverse those colors. All right, so reverse the colors on the inside one, and it's going in the opposite direction. There you go. So cool. You can do all sorts of things. You can change the colors, the animation speed, the animation timing function, the inset, so you can decide how far from the edge this is, which will determine the size. So you can do so much from these SVGs from Illustrator. It's just phenomenal how easy it is to do once you understand it. All right, so that's pretty much the creating of the SVGs. Now, let's have a look at the actual code. So what I've done to make this so that we can override using these variables here is I've created a external class, so X animated stamp as my main block, and I've got variables here for everything that I want to change. So my padding, which is the distance from the edge, so the outer edge of here, so padding to this inner content. So that could be anything you like. It doesn't have to be an icon, it can be text, can be an image, can be whatever you want. And this, as that grows, this will automatically grow around it. Actually, let's look at that. So if I go to that icon, select the icon, and we set the size of the icon to be, I don't know, 6 REM. Why is my icon size not changing? That's interesting. Oh, just the editor. So something funky in the Bricks editor. So I've set the icon size to 10 REM. So now that's bigger. All this automatically expands around the outside of it. And the reason it's bigger is because, as I said, with SVG, it doesn't just change the size of the box, it actually scales all of the contents that are inside that box as well. So that's actually useful in this case. Now, coming back to here, so we've got our padding, which is so we can have padding between the outside and where the content is, so that we can inset some of these effects without affecting the border. If we want that more padding, what we could do is maybe make that 50. This is a global setting here. Okay, now we've got more padding around there, so we've got some white space around that. Okay, or you can do that on an individual basis. So, you know, using these rules over here, you know, through the style and just, wrong one. We can't have that class selected. We can just, you know, change the padding there. So it's entirely up to you. I'm going to just refresh this page. For some reason, the editor's not updating. Refresh that and see if it does. Yeah, there we go. So it's just something freaky in the Bricks editor. All right, so that's that. Now, what I've done, I've created a circle 1 and circle 2 set of variables, and we've got inset. So that's the top right, bottom left for your absolute positioning. We've got our animation name, and I've got this one as X rotate CCW, and I've got some keyframes down here for that. And the keyframes are basically a clockwise rotation and a counterclockwise rotation. Okay, so then we've got a timing effect. These are all defaults. The duration of the effect. And then we've got our actual SVG stuff here, which is the ST0 width, color, and fill by default. ST1 width, color, and fill. If you're going to create from Illustrator here, if you're going to maybe do a third color. Oops. Let's say this here, we're going to make that a different color. Let's make that a green. Okay, what will happen is when we save this, Okay, so if we look at our, again, we've got to make sure we select style elements, SVG code. Now we've got our ST0, ST1, ST2. So the ST2 will be the green that we just added. So if you're going to use 3 colors, you're then going to have to come back to here and you're going to have another set of these. So it's going to be ST0, ST1, ST2. I'm just doing 2 colors. You can do that if you want to and add the 3rd color in there if you want to. And basically this here is a replica of ST1. We're just setting different defaults. So inset of 20 pixels. So by default, this inside circle is 20 pixels inside the outer box. So it's sized accordingly, being from 20 pixels top, right, bottom and left. Okay. And then we just got colors and a different rotation. That's counterclockwise and that's clockwise. So by default, that's what they do. All right. And then we have our wrapper, X animated stamp wrapper. Now with the wrapper, which is basically these elements here. So the wrapper, so the animated stamp contains all those variables. The animated stamp wrapper is that one there, and what we want to do is we want all of the stuff that's inside that to be relevant to that wrapper, that box there. So the aspect ratio is 1:1, so that if it gets wider, so if we're putting text in there and we make the text wider, we make this icon bigger, the wider it is, it automatically sets the height to be exactly the same to maintain that aspect ratio. So that's what that's for. We've then got the isolate, which I'm not using. That's if we're going to use any negative Z index on any of the elements inside, which I haven't had a need for at this stage, but it gives you a different stacking order. Our padding for our outside box, so that's our default padding setting up here, again, which you can override. And that gives you your space between this outside edge and where this content on the inside starts, allowing for these animating circles. Okay, and then we've got the position relative. The position relative is so that when we absolutely position these SVGs, it's relevant to that wrapper. So it'll go top, right, bottom, left of that wrapper. Hope you're still with me. And then we want to center the content that's inside that. So whatever that content is, we want it to be vertically and horizontally centered. So we set it to flex direction of column, and justify center and line item center. And that centers the content. It's simple CSS, nothing spectacular at this point. All right, so we come to our, and this is Sass. I've actually included the CSS now in the code link that I put in the description. If you don't have a Sass preprocessor, I'm using Scripts Organizer. I know a lot of people use WP Codebox as well. If you don't have a Sass preprocessor, I've included the CSS so you can use that instead. So anyway, our first circle, circle 1. Okay, position absolute, inset, circle 1 inset. So where are we? Inset circle 1 inset 0, which means that we're going to go all the way to the top, right, bottom and left. So you can see from this box that outer circle fits inside the box. Okay, and then we've got target the SVGs inside circle 1, and then target ST0, which is the class that was created by Illustrator. Aha, making sense. And we're going to override whatever stroke was set from Illustrator with whatever our default stroke variable is, and the stroke width and the stroke fill. By default, this is none. I can't remember what these are, they're just all up here. But they're just set in those defaults. And then we're going to do the same with ST1. If you added a 3rd color, you need to add another one of these and add ST2 and then update these to ST2 as well. And that'll give you your 3rd color. Okay, and then on the circle 2, we're doing the same thing, but we're targeting the circle 2 variables. Okay, and then down here, we've just got standard CSS keyframes. Nothing flash about that. It's just the clockwise rotate goes from 0 to 359 degrees. Counterclockwise goes from 0 to negative 359 degrees. I've got another little one here for floating, which we're not using in this example. And that's pretty much the CSS. So By having the variables in this block here, what that does, that allows us to add this block to any of these other elements. So for example, the basic text here, by adding the animated stamp block to that, we've got access to these variables here. Okay, and that's pretty much all there is to that. So what else can I tell you? I think that's probably enough, really. So yeah, you've got the code, you've got the theory. I will finish on one thing, I guess, that a couple of things that I looked at that made me decide to go down this path. One of them was the initial attempt I did at this, I used a single element and I used the before and the after pseudo selector. And I got it to work, it was fine to a point. So when you use the before and after pseudo selector, to add the SVG, you can probably add it as a content if it's base 64 encoded. I didn't even try that, but I added it as a background image as the SVG. And when you do that, you can't style the attributes using CSS, so you have to create the artwork in Illustrator with the colors that you're actually going to use, and then you can't vary those. The same with the strokes. And it also has to be URL encoded, which means it's harder to edit. I like the idea here that we just take our standard, let's go to a simple one. Let's have a look at this one down here. Standard, simple, it might be a bit more complicated. Let's go to this one. There we go. Very simple SVG. So it's got hardly anything to it. So basically we've copied and pasted that. We can see everything we got there. And it's just easy to look at, easy to understand. We've got our round line caps. We can change that on a per element base. Actually, I'm wondering if I change one of those. If I change that to square now, ST1, make that square. There you go. See now our green sector here is got squared off ends. So you can edit those. You can then edit the CSS variables associated with that particular element. So this one's a circle 2. So have a look at your code. Here's all our circle 2 variables, and you can override any of those just by targeting root and then overriding those to whatever you want those to be. So I think it's a good way of doing it. Now, the before and after pseudo, also you can only have 2 circles. Let's say you wanted these 2 and you wanted a third one inside there with some dots going around or something. It makes it a bit complex, but if you wanted to, you could. Okay. We could also, I believe, because we're targeting CSS, I want to try something. Actually, no, it's going to make the video too long. I was going to say you could probably even animate these elements here. So, for example, with the ST curious now, curious. So circle here, basic text. I'm wondering, I want to do a bit of a test here. So if I went root, root SVG, and then .st1. Let's look at animating that. So if we went transform, actually we need an animation now because we want it to be infinite. So animation is, what have we got in these animations down here? Duration, timing, infinite, and the name. So duration, make it say 5 seconds. Timing, make it ease. Infinite, and we'll call it segment warble. Segment warble. There we go. And we're going to create a keyframes for that. think we've got a wobble one over here. I'm just going to have a look at it. I have. That's a float, I called it. I'm going to pinch that for now. Is it working? It's there we go. So we can see our green. Actually, let's not do the X. We'll just do the Y. Okay. And maybe we'll make that over 2 seconds and see what that looks like here. So you can see our green segment going in and out as it rotates. And the way we've done that is just targeting the root, SVG, the ST1 class, and adding an animation to it. So it's extremely powerful to do pretty much whatever you want. I mean, this is a bit weird, but you can do pretty much whatever you want. Actually, let's make it really bad. Let's make it 100 pixels. Ooh, that's a real ripper. Okay. Make it 5 seconds. Let's grab where's the animation circle time? Just shows you that you can play around with the animations of individual segments if you create individual segments. And the trick to that is in Illustrator, if you want individual segments, give them different colors before you save it as the SVG. And then they will save as a completely separate class that you can target separately. So that is my trick for that. So hopefully that is something that you like. It explains how the SVGs are created. It explains how they're targeted with CSS and how you can override them with these simple rules as well, and get creative and do whatever you want to do. So I hope you like this. If you do, please hit the subscribe, please hit the like, and let everybody know. Thank you.